we are kicking off our monthly webinar series today. And we are hoping to ask Bindas and share Dil Se, because that is what the Galaxy platform is all about. We do appreciate you spending your Sunday evening with us and hope that you've come prepared with snacks and chai or whatever other drink you would prefer, because this is going to be a really engrossing, very interesting conversation, and we don't want you to miss a word. We'll also be fielding a few audience questions at the end. So if you feel that there's something you really want to ask both our panelists, please put it into the chat box and we will try and get to as many questions as we can. Coming to our web series, while the team at Galaxy was discussing what would be the best topic to start our webinar series, we were thinking of doing something very women-oriented, and that was our line of thought. But then the second wave started in India, and parts of the country are going into lockdown. There's a vaccination rollout happening, and there's a lot of questions around COVID, the vaccines, and the rest of it. And as of now, most of the people seem to be getting their information either from the newspaper or WhatsApp University. Now, WhatsApp University is not the place to be going for this kind of information, especially not with something as serious as COVID, which is why we've got two experts on board today. And they are the ones who are going to speak to us. These are people you can trust about their opinions, and these are valid opinions from experts. And we thought it was important to have this interaction between experts and the general public. Our first panelist for today is Dr. Smriti Bajpai. She's a specialist in infectious diseases, and she's been leading the fight at KM Hospital, one of Dubai's busiest general hospitals, government hospitals. And not only has she battled COVID as a doctor, she and her whole family, which spans 4 generations with ages ranging from 1 year to 75 plus years, were all infected by COVID at the start of the pandemic last year. Fortunately, everyone recovered and they are in good health. But he can speak both from the perspective as a doctor and also as a patient and having a family that all had the disease. Smriti has a lot more qualifications related to COVID. She does the clinical management of COVID since the start of the pandemic. She's the one who's been part of the team commissioning the ICU and the COVID wards at KM Hospital. She's a member of the critical clinical case review for the atypical cases of COVID. He's the nodal officer for the death review committee of COVID. He's conducted training on PPE and how to use it, which was a completely new concept in India. He's conducted training sessions for students regarding the clinical management. He's been involved in clinical trials for the newer drugs and also in the plasma trial. So she's one of the best informed specialists that we could find to speak to us today. She's even been featured on BBC for her expertise. So a very, very warm welcome to you, Dr. Smriti.
Thank you. Thank you, Karishma, for all the nice words. I don't know how much I deserve, but thanks for the intro. Really overwhelmed.
Thank you. We're very glad to have you here, Smriti. So just to ease into the conversation, just quickly, could you tell us what's the current situation in India in terms of COVID? As a normal person, how afraid should I be?
Can you repeat your question, Karishma? It got a little broken.
Okay. So with the current situation in India in terms of COVID, as a normal human being just living in the country, how afraid should I be? How bad is the situation? Because you can't really trust media all the time.
So, fine. So what I would say is that we all saw this entire thing started somewhere last year and end of February, March in India. And that time everything was new, we were just thrown into the sea, so to say. Okay, so it just got disconnected again. Okay, I think so. I understood your question. That how fearful one should be about the second wave, and I would say that somewhere down the line, Indians became a little relaxed post Diwali. I think so. The numbers started to come down, so we were pretty relaxed, and so no one thought that what has just hit us now would ever happen. So to say. How scared we should be pretty scared at the moment because the numbers are huge. It has somehow again hit us. Currently, if you say I don't say this is a wave, I always keep telling this is behaving like a tsunami to us. Okay, so what I was saying was that I talk more it like, I say that this is more like a tsunami rather than a wave. It's not behaving like. We have the numbers have increased so rapidly, and the more the numbers and show the mortality also is high because of that. So pretty much we should be quite scared, and it is definitely not to be taken lightly at all at the moment, especially in India at this moment. I must say that. And we did have this hotspot thing in the beginning that, there were certain states which were said that they are hotspots, but currently now it's not that. It's spreading throughout, and not a very serious condition, and definitely a condition to be worried about.
Currently, we are also hearing that COVID is affecting a much younger population. And we are hearing things like double mutation. And what is making the current scenario worse than the previous one that we faced?
Yeah, correct. So last year, with our experience, we did not see much of pediatric population, or less than 12 years of people being affected by COVID so much. It was not zero, I should say, last year, but it was much less compared to the adult population. Whereas compared to the last, in this wave, we are seeing younger population also getting affected, and we are seeing patients coming up in the younger group as well. Now, what the reason would be, we are still in the learning curve, so we are still learning about why this has happened. Some scientists or some experts have put that as because of the mutation in the virus, but we are still early to say that this is mutation, and it is not just, that after the first wave and then the thing started to, dip down. Everybody was very careless, and people were indulging in COVID inappropriate behavior like anything. They were, going to the weddings and to, celebrating at home, having house parties. So probably somewhere down the line, the guards went down, and this, as I say, is a very smart virus. It will outsmart you. So please don't try, behaving any which way which is not appropriate for and that's when, you will see that the numbers started to increase. So that is one reason which I would attribute to. And when they say that the numbers itself are high, so, we are going to get a population of all age groups being affected. So probably we are also seeing this, but too early to say that it is just because of, it's because of mutant virus. We do have mutations which have been observed. There is that UK variant and the Brazilian variant and the South African variant, and then there are double variants which have been picked up. But this is more an academic level discussion at the moment. We are still learning why and how these variants are behaving. To be able to attribute the intense increase to these variants is probably not correct at the moment, because it's the behavior patterns of population itself are very callous. So that looks more logical a reason for the sudden spike rather than this variant which people are would like to blame to.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Smith. Also, we're having the vaccination rollout in different countries. Shouldn't that have lessened the numbers? Why do you think the numbers are still climbing despite the
Right. So very logical question. Most people will say, "Arey, now we have a vaccine. Why is this should not be the time when we should be having such huge numbers?" Sadly to say that the vaccine coverage itself of India is not good at the moment. Numbers wise, it would look very, significant, 13 crore people or 3 crore people, or, so many lakh of people are vaccinated. But look at the population in India. We have a country of 100 plus crores. This is nothing. We have not even reached 2% of probably, and we are talking about a herd immunity which develops when a 70% population gets vaccinated. So to expect that with just 2 months of vaccination rollout, the vaccination rollout happened in India in January, which was initially for healthcare workers and later on for frontline. And for the general population, also for the elderly high risk group, was much later in March. So to be expecting the vaccination to bring down the numbers so soon is definitely was not correct and not logical at all. The vaccine will play its role, and it is important that vaccination drive continues. But it would not have been able to bring down these the wave which we are seeing so early, because the coverage itself is low. The logistics of it in a huge country like India is not easy.
So this would be why a country like the UK is seeing 55% vaccination, and that's why their numbers are growing.
Probably,
Okay.
and Israel, and we have an example of Israel, because that's the only country which probably, because of their numbers, are able to vaccinate almost 60%. They are probably reaching that number of 70, which some scientists have said that would be appropriate for a herd immunity. That is the only country which has been able to achieve that, closer to that. And they have seen significant reduction in the numbers of hospital admissions, in number of mortality, at least post that figure of vaccination which and that is what we are, as I say, that we all are learning. So the good part is that we are sharing information from all the countries, and I would say that Israel is one country from which we are learning that vaccination does make an impact. So people need to understand the importance of vaccination.
So since we have been talking about vaccination, one of our Galaxy members on the platform, Chimiri Joshi, she said that she heard that a friend's sister had taken the vaccine a few days back, and then she said she got her period very early. Does the vaccine affect women that way? Are there any side effects we need to be worried about, or is it just an outlying population?
No, absolutely not. This is probably more of a coincidence than an actual reason for because of the vaccine. There is no causality related to the vaccine in this case, I must say. The vaccine does not have any impact on the reproductive cycle or on the menstrual cycle of the female, so they don't need to worry. We need to know that currently this vaccine is not approved for pregnant and lactating women. That is only because we don't have enough data on them. And as we all know that every new medicine or vaccination which comes into the market has to undergo a process where it is checked on different populations, different races, different genders, and then you come out with knowing what would be the impact of it. Now, because of the pandemic, everything has been very rapidified in the case of COVID vaccination. So we are yet to know what is the response of pregnant women and lactating women to the vaccine. So I am sure in long run we will be able to vaccinate even pregnant women, because we are not seeing, there are certain studies which are going on. So definitely it has no impact on the menstrual cycle, neither on the reproductive cycle of the female. So what she is saying is probably more of a coincidence rather than because of the vaccine. It's not because of the vaccine.
So it is a good idea to just go ahead and get the vaccine as soon as it is available to the right age.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for that. Now, as a normal human being, some of us are not yet eligible to get the vaccine because there are still some limits. So what other precautions should we be taking, whether we have the vaccine or we have not yet got the vaccine? Other than social distancing, is there anything else we can be doing?
Okay, so as I'm sure we all have been talking about social distancing, and again reiterating, psychologists and psychiatrists tend to say, don't say social distancing, say physical distancing, because, socially we need to connect. These are difficult times. So yeah, definitely physical distancing has to continue. The other two important things which everybody has been telling is about the sanitation part, that you need to keep cleaning your hands with simple soap and water is also okay. Sanitizer or alcohol-based sanitizer is good enough. But it should be properly done. Always remember, whenever we talk about these things, similar is true for masking as well. It is the most. Last year I used to tell that we never had vaccines with us. We had only these things, and we were able to overcome the increased numbers and peak with these three things. Let's not forget them. We have to reiterate to the population that, okay, go back to those behavior patterns of masking yourself, physical distancing, and sanitization. And this year we are also telling people that maybe there are variants around, and we are seeing a lot of new things coming up with the COVID. So maybe a double masking would be more better than a single mask itself. And again, it could be a simple cotton mask. You need not go for a N95 or a tri-ply mask. Those are for healthcare settings where the risk of exposure is more. A simple cotton mask and a double masking would add to the protection. But wearing this mask properly is equally important. Just for the sake of wearing a mask doesn't make a sense. People are keeping it on the chin. Some people feel that it is only for the mouth. It's not for the nose. It has to be completely covering your nose, mouth. And also, I would like to, at this platform, I want to reiterate that whenever you're talking to people, tell them that when you're talking, you don't need to remove your mask. Or when you are coughing or sneezing, you don't need to remove your mask. That's the time when you're probably exposing other people more. So it is important that a proper masking and preventing, don't remove the mask while speaking, don't remove the mask while coughing or sneezing. Okay, let it be there. So if you are in a place there are so many people around, mask should be there. So these three important things, and along with this, the fourth, which we were talking about, is the vaccination. These are the only armamentarium we have currently against the war against COVID, and I feel all four have to be appropriately used, and it will definitely show a difference.
Thank you for those clarifications, Dr. Smriti. Just going into something more personal now. You had your whole family, 4 generations, 1-year-old twins, 75 plus people all in the house being testing positive, some were hospitalized. What was that situation like?
Okay, so I must say, probably today we are in a better state as to what we were last year. We did not know what this is all about. Suddenly, this was at the end of again, similar last year, I think, so pretty much at the same time. At the end of the April, I was detected as a part of my screening process. And then all my contacts, which is my entire family, one after the other, was detected COVID positive. The norms at that time were different. That the moment you were tested, you were supposed to be quarantined in a facility. So we have the Seven Hills Hospital at Mumbai. So I was taken to Seven Hills Hospital along with my husband and my mother-in-law, because all 3 of us were detected positive, and my grandfather as well. So 4 of us amongst the family of 9 were immediately taken by the hospital ambulance to Seven Hills Hospital, because that's what the norm was at the time, even when we were mildly symptomatic and were not having much symptoms. Suddenly seeing all of us infected, and we were pretty scared at that time. It was like the initial 1 or 2 days, I must say that it was like a roller coaster going on. What's happening? I couldn't even understand how I need to tackle situation. What was happening was, it's a very strange phenomenon. Most of the time, it's the young who take care of the elderly, as we know in the, in our Indian setup of family systems. Now here, we were the ones who were infected first. So we were isolated. Okay. Now, I didn't know how, the work dynamics, how my house dynamics would work, who will take care of the children. They were just 1.5, 2 years old. So, they had to be taken in. So very difficult time, very stressful mentally. Although luckily, we all were very lucky that as far as the disease goes, everyone was very mild and asymptomatic, many of them. And we all recovered very soon. The entire process of 14 or probably a month or so was very stressful. The initial week was more stressful when we were more grappling with what to do where, and how the high risk group needs to be cared more about, and how the entire who will manage the household things, who will be taking care of the food and cleaning and everything. So those 7-8 days initial were more challenging because we were still not able to understand what's going on. And we had to go to the hospital, and then hospital and everything was isolated. So those things were more disturbing and stressful. But I think so after the initial 10 days, things settled, and we know, okay, now we have everything in place. And the entire, I must say, my entire society, the housing society where I'm staying, and my friends and my family members, the extended ones, were quite a support. If nothing, they could do at least that mental support which you get, that if any further adversity happens, they're there to help you, they'll guide you. And things were being supplied to my house without anybody being able to go out. That was itself a big support. So that was pretty much the time. But I'm sure after the entire year went, the things have changed now. We are not anymore admitting asymptomatic or mild in the hospital, and people are home isolating, which gives a lot of, mental peace rather than, suddenly bringing you out and keeping you in a hospital setup. It's not an easy thing. So that's how I would describe in, few words how it
That
was.
was quite a harrowing experience.
Yeah.
And as a doctor, what has it been like? It's been so different having to wear a PPE for so many hours in a day. How many times do you have to change that PPE? Supposing you need to even do something like go to a washroom, you would have to change your PPE is what I'm assuming. So how difficult has that been wearing so many extra layers in the summer heat and things like that?
Yeah, very, very challenging, I must say. Now this is, again, I would say compared to the last year, we know this much better now. That we need initially this PP entire thing. It is a process in itself. We have to go to the room, the donning room, the entire thing, which is almost we had PP kits were not even breathable. I must say at times initially. Then we gave them feedback that we need PPs, which at least the fabric of it should be breathable. So when we wear this, if there is any breach in it, we are exposed. So one has to be very careful while putting it on and more so while removing it, because we have been exposed to that high viral load area where we have been working. We see to it that we don't put the duty hours of the doctors beyond 6 hours. So there's a rotation which is made that every doctor in a PP doesn't have to work for more than 6 hours. So 6 hours itself is not a very small time. We have had shortage of PPs as well as healthcare workers. So that has to be balanced. So what we usually do is we hydrate ourselves before entering into the PPE. So we take proper hydration, use the washroom, have a breakfast, and then only enter. Most of the time, because these are young population and we are young, we are able to withhold that 6-hour period without in the middle going to the washroom. But if situations like that has arisen, like for example, I must give you an example. One of our fellow residents, during the peak of the heat and humidity in Mumbai, when this was around, I must say, June, July, it was so hot, and in that PP, he was sweating so much in spite of all the hydration things. He felt giddy and he was, sweating so much. So we had to tell them, okay, now you need to go out. So we give them a break sort of a thing. Somebody else comes over, replaces. This person goes out, docks, again hydrates, and then we again give them another PP. And so situations have come like that. But as I must say that in the initial phase, we were even short of PPs. So we had to keep in mind that we don't waste so many PPs just for giving breaks like that. But it's a very tough environment to work. We have observed that now we, at least in ICU setup, even if the air conditioning is working, we can still, the person can work in the PP. So that air conditioning provides some little bit of help. But now everyone knows that it's been proven that COVID is also airborne. So proper ventilation needs to be there, especially in these places. So not every place could have an air conditioning. In some ICU setups, we have had air conditioning where the PP is bearable. Otherwise, I must say it's a very physically and mentally challenging to work in PPs.
Thank you for letting us know how, because as a layperson, it's difficult to understand what a doctor goes through. So having been through all this, it's so stressful. You're exposed, even while you're wearing PPE, you're exposed to the virus at some level because you're dealing with COVID wards. So what centers you? What keeps you grounded? What keeps you going back to work every day? Where do you get this inspiration and strength from?
I don't know where do I get this? Probably somewhere, if you go back to, we've been so into the business or into the mess of COVID that we've not even got time to think on these aspects, frankly speaking. But if you ask me, probably somewhere down the line, our own upbringing, those moral values which have been taught to me, and that sense with which I opted for this profession, keeps me going. And more so currently, I must say, when I see so much of misery around, so many people getting affected, and there is such difficult times. I feel that it is my inherent duty. It is, I can't go back foot and think of, no, Baba, this is not the time. I should take care of myself. No, somewhere down the line, that moral values, those inherent, that feeling inside keeps me. I must say, if I see 20 or 50 patients in a day, and if out of them even 10 or 15, go back home smiling, and those smiles on their face, those thanks which they give to us, again gives me that power to come again the next day, work. Maybe for many we are not able to make any difference, but there are many where I am able to make some difference. So those these things probably is keeping me going. It is stressful, I must say. It's more easier said than done. When I say it keeps me going, by the end of the day, the way we see things happening and panning out, very disheartening. There's a lot of pandemic fatigue. There's a lot of stress as far as the healthcare. The mental stress is too much, So it's easier said and done, but to again pull yourself up and go again to work, I think so. It's our patients, their improvement, the smiles on their face, people going back home, coming in serious conditions and then going back home is what keeps us going again. Is I would, briefly, if I have to say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smriti. We are truly honored and privileged to have doctors like you who are looking after patients across the world. It is only because of healthcare workers and doctors like you that I think it has made life somewhat manageable, because it would have been so much worse if doctors also had to throw their hands up and say, no, I can't do this anymore. And
right.
We admire your courage and fortitude. I hope that you can stay. You're very welcome. I hope you can stay on with us until the end. I see that there are a lot of audience questions also. So we'll just keep them together and deal with audience questions at the end. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Galaxy, for the opportunity. Thank you. I'll be there.
Thank you. So our second panelist for today is Liane Pais. Liane is a psychological therapist with experience in trauma and PTSD aftercare. Now, she founded something called the Unopened Box, an online mental health organization that is geared towards creating safe spaces. And I think Galaxy being a safe space, it's been a natural connect of both. The Unopened Box was incubated at IMB, and she has worked with over 2,200 clients in the last few months. In college, she even wrote a dissertation paper on the effect of, let me get this right, the effect of Facebook on identity formation. Now, she definitely identified her target audience quite early, as millennials are currently forming a large part of her clientele. But mental health is not just for the millennials, it's for everyone. And that's why we wanted to have Liane on here today. Welcome, Liane. It's lovely to have you.
Thanks, Karishma. I'm so happy to be here. It's good to be here.
Thanks, Liane. So just coming into, instead of me talking more about the Unopened Box, could you just tell us, the Unopened Box went online at the start of the pandemic, so it was very COVID linked. What prompted that, and how has been the experience of providing this support on an online platform rather than face-to-face, which is what you were doing earlier?
So the Unopened Box was actually a COVID response, where I had a lot of clients from the past who reached out to me saying, hey, can you give us resources, something that we did in therapy that we can use, because we're back to facing uncertainty and we don't really know when the lockdown was going to end, right? It was 14 days and another 14 days, and it just kept getting extended. I found myself sending a lot of resources to individuals and said the easiest way to do it is probably open an Instagram page for it. And that's essentially how it started. It took off in all of 1 year. And it's pretty much, I think, March 26th made it 1 year. And yeah, so it was a COVID response. The idea of it was to help people equip themselves empower themselves and use healthy coping strategies at home, which is very doable. Many people may not need a psychological therapist. Many people may not have access to it. And more than that, there's so much stigma that our idea was to break the stigma around it and offer people something they can use from a space that is very different. So it's not just therapy, but you also have workshops, you also have webinars like this, meetups, and create safe spaces for people from community-based initiatives.
So you talked about how mental health awareness is not that, what would I say, awareness is not as high in India, and there is the stigma attached to it. Do you feel that the pandemic has changed the public attitude or awareness towards mental health?
Massively, I believe, because I think around the lockdown time, there were a lot of celebrities who started speaking about it. And I think people themselves for the first time witnessed it because they were forced to be in confined spaces, places like places of worship, places of connection, like clubs, pubs, whatever else is people go out to, restaurants, were all closing down. And the need for connection grew so much that I do believe that that's when people realized that mental health was a thing. There were no more boundaries with work-life balance because that also was taken away because you had to work from home, and suddenly you have kids running through your Zoom calls. You have to tell your family to keep quiet, sort of do the cooking, do the cleaning, do everything, and teach your kids. So I think that's when it became a very real phenomenon and people sort of started paying attention to mental health. So I do believe the awareness has gone up massively in the past 1 year.
Are you seeing any specific mental health issues being exacerbated because of the pandemic? Because there's been so much, as you said, we are dealing with isolation, social or physical distancing, unable to even meet up with friends, not see your family for so long. Are there any specifics that you think, or any stories you could tell us about without obviously keeping confidentiality? Is there things here?
Right. So one of the largest things I think, and especially since it's a female forum, is that burnout is a very real thing. And right now across our cases, not just mine, but my colleagues and the people who work at the organization, we're noticing a lot of burnout, whether it's men, women, children. It's something that each one is going through. There's grief, there's trauma, and it's not just grief for loss of a person due to COVID. It's grief of identity. It's grief of not having a graduation ceremony. It's grief of not being able to connect with people. And all of this pile-on of work, not having safe spaces to turn to, that seems to be predominantly there. Anxiety and depression are also escalating, alcoholism, domestic violence. But to a large extent, if you ask me, those look like consequences of the burnout because it's been a long time since people have actually taken a break without fear. Fear seems to be overriding a lot of things right now.
And have you had any patients who have been either sufferers of COVID or caregivers for people of COVID? Because it's an entirely different ballgame, a different level of stress. Is that causing any specific problems?
Yes. I, in fact, have a client who lives in a joint family. There are 19 of them in that house. And one person of the 19 tested positive and all 19 were out, right, including herself. But because she was one of the younger ones, she was expected to look after her grandma. She was expected to look after the elders in the family. And for her, it was almost a thing where I have to run my business and breastfeed because I'm younger and I'm able to contribute to the household. But at the same time, I also need to show up for so many different people with so many different needs, wants, responses. And it gets very, very overwhelming. There's a point where you, like Dr. Smriti said, you forget that you exist and everyone else sort of becomes more important. And that fatigue gets to you, the compassion fatigue, which leads to then anger and resentment. But there's no space for that, right? You need to just push through it. And I think that's what's leading to a lot of depression, anxiety, and hopelessness. So to a large extent, that's also where the grief is stemming from. And I think that's something people need to be aware of because people look at grief as loss of a person, but it's more than just a loss of a person. It's also identity, safe spaces, and a whole lot more that they may be grieving.
We're also seeing a lot of college students who have never met their classmates, the ones who have just entered into college. There are students graduating who are having trouble with job prospects, no hiring happening. Are you seeing any extra cases in these kind of age groups or young children?
So one of the beauties of the younger population is that they find ways to make it happen, whether they like it or not. So one of my clients who is in the US, they had a virtual graduation ceremony where they wore their caps and gowns and they rented Halloween costumes as well. And they're finding ways to be adaptable towards it. But another thing is the frustration levels are very real, right? The anger is very real. A lot of them are paying for an education that they're not even sitting in classrooms. They're not building connections. They've paid for an experience that they're entirely missing out on. They might as well be sitting in their hometowns and, experiencing education. So if you look at it from that perspective, they are feeling a lot of burnout. A lot of youngsters are coming in, especially students who say, how do we do this? Because even therapy right now is virtual. And the thing is, we're with screens all the time. And after a while, it gets hard to disconnect from that because that forms your basis of connection. People who live alone, that is your basis of connection, right? And there are so many people who say, we just miss being hugged, that tactile feeling of being held, just touching someone without worrying if they've had COVID or they've met someone who's had COVID. It's a very real fear. So those are things we're looking at right now. We're working towards building connection. In fact, we have a workshop on soon where we're hoping to get people to start interacting, different groups of people where they've been screened. We had a support group system that works beautifully. They're still in touch with each other. So we're trying to find new ways to make it happen so that people feel connected without, missing the physical aspect as much, or at least reducing it.
And since you were talking about the physical aspect of it, I know that you are a fantastic artist yourself and you love animals. You do use both art and animals in your therapy. So, having an animal at home, I have 2 cats. I've lost count of how many dogs you have. Hugging them makes such a difference.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about how art and animals can be therapeutic?
Right. So in fact, that's very interesting because one of the things I've noticed with my clients is a lot of them who are living alone have brought home pets, whether they've rescued hamsters or dogs or cats. That's something that's really nice that we're seeing happening because people are looking at connections not just as human to human contact, but also having other spaces. But I do believe that animals and art, the one thing they have in common is it helps you express yourself. And the beauty of that is with art, you may not have the words, you may not really know what's going on, but when you put your crayons and your colors to paper, and not with the idea of drawing a house or a scenic art piece, but actually just drawing what you're feeling, it can help you really engage with what's going on inside. And even if your, expression is a mess, it helps you at least feel like you've put it out there, even at a time that's overwhelming for you. So I believe that's massively helpful. My therapy dog, Callie, she's fantastic. And honestly, there are some days when even as therapists, we do feel the burn because you have a heavy day, you're surrounded by grief, you're surrounded by trauma, you're also experiencing it while your clients are experiencing it, right? It's not like we know what a pandemic is because this is our first time too. And there are days when I just go and sit next to her. She doesn't need to know what I'm going through, but she'll just come and sit and just hugging her, holding her, having that contact. Sometimes she licks me, sometimes she wants to be petted. And just that fun, the playfulness, the lightness that we may not be feeling, they sense. And I think having a therapy, having any pet is extremely therapeutic and totally worth it. Like I'm so encouraging the concept of people getting pets, even if it's as small as a hamster or a white mouse. So
I think there's also something about the unconditional love that you get in return from a pet.
Yeah,
which
and
makes
it's beautiful. And more than the unconditional, right? It's like they sense your energy. They don't need to be told. They don't back answer. They don't say anything. They're just there. There's zero judgment. As long as they're getting fussed, there is no judgment. And I think that's an alternative therapeutic space, right? Having that non-judgmental safe space to turn to. So that's really helpful. Yeah. 100%.
So yes, you've mentioned art, you've mentioned animals. For someone whom this is not possible, or even someone whom this is possible for, are there any other coping techniques that you would advise for people at home? Because as you said, burnout and fatigue are really real problems that everyone, I think, is facing. You cannot say that no one is affected by it. So what would you recommend for?
So one of the things that I think we first need to start doing is allow ourselves to feel. And the reason I'm saying this is a coping mechanism and a self-care mechanism is because a lot of times you just like, I don't know why I'm feeling like this rather than I am feeling like this. And even if the world is responding differently, I am allowed to validate and say, this is me. And the minute we do that, the amount of reassurance we feel from just saying my pain is real is a huge self-care technique. We use it with our clients. We use it on ourselves. And it's something that's a great starting point for most people. Reassuring yourself, telling yourself that while you don't know what will happen, at least you are showing up in whatever capacity, right? Acknowledging that. Now, the second thing that I really recommend is mindful behavior because it's very hard to get an experience right now because any form of an experience also comes with that much fear. You go out, it's almost like you cannot go out freely. There's no concept of I go out without the idea of having COVID at the back of my mind. And if people engage in simple mindful activities, like for me, my morning ritual is I make myself an iced coffee every day. And from the smell of the coffee powder and, putting my ice cubes in the mixie, to just be in that moment, to enjoy the process, feel the feels, smell the smells, the sensations, and just be there, because somewhere it gives you those 2 minutes to breathe. A lot of people coincidentally are turning to substances. And my point is, the reason you would want to smoke or smoke up is also because you are breathing. It is an activity that involves breathing. But if you give yourself just the time to, maybe even just sigh, the whole physical aspect of sighing can be very, very therapeutic. And you don't need to leave your house to do it. You can sit in a meeting and just sigh it out. And that's something that helps. So there's mindfulness. There's also connection online, where call a friend for the sake of calling a friend and talking about stuff that is not work, not the pandemic, which may be just making random plans, ideas, but at least fostering connection, right? Trying out new things. That's my favorite. I made a baking bucket list that I went through in the first part of the pandemic, where I said I'm going to bake different things from different parts of the world that I cannot access. So I at least have good food being made at home by me. And then you also have other aspects where now that's too extra for me. So I garden. But mindful activities where you get yourself into it and say it's different, it's slow, but I'm allowing myself to feel as I grow through it.
And I think something like gardening is a lot more forgiving than doing something with pets who will remind you when you've not fed them or groomed them.
100%, right? And worst case, you say, there are enough plants to say I will like regrow them from seeds and figure it out the second time around. So yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you for those amazing suggestions. Just to close up right now, when should someone be seeking the help of a mental health professional? Whether it's for ourselves or whether it's for someone, what are the warning signs that we need to look out for and say that, no, you need professional help right now?
Right.
I need professional help.
Right. So one of the things I say is don't wait till you're hopeless and helpless, because a lot of clients come in on the verge of, an absolute breakdown. And my point is, while that's not bad, the minute you start feeling overwhelmed, the minute you feel like there is no safe space to talk about what you're going through, or you're unable to understand the confusion, the pain, it's a good time, because when you come in at a phase where you're not yet overwhelmed, it's easier to grow through it. Whereas when you come in at the most desperate time, because then we're sorting the SOS and then getting towards, healing and coping. But other warning signs would be, one is if you constantly use the word anxiety. If you notice that you are feeling stressed out, there is burnout, you're not getting a break. There is a constant change in behavior in terms of you're becoming extra snappy, you're reacting to people, everything is triggering you, you're crying all the time, or just a constant sense of fatigue, because I think that's something that's happening right now. It's a repeated fatigue, and very often when clients come in, their first thing is, hey, but I don't know why I'm so tired. I'm not doing anything different. But while you're not doing anything different in the past 2 years, it's very different from the rest of your life, and you're playing multiple roles, you're going through multiple paces, and actually bringing it inward, right? And to say, I am feeling it. I'm putting it out there for someone else who's not going to judge me, who's not in my social circle. It's a safe space, right? And even if you don't want to do therapy, there are workshops to try it out and see what it's like. And there are so many spaces where you can actually explore yourself, and that's a great starting point to just talk. Ideally, mental health professional, but worst case, talk to a friend, talk to a colleague, talk to a family, talk to your dog, right? And just put it out there. So reaching out, connecting, in my opinion, it's never too late, but it's never too early either to do it.
Thank you so much for that, Leanne. It's been fantastic chatting with you. I see a lot of questions in the chat box, and since I've been talking and listening all this time, Sonali has very kindly consented to handle the Q&A part of it, which is the audience questions. Sonali is the founder of Galaxy, and I'm going to let her come in right now, and I'm going to shut up for some time.
Thanks for this, Karishma, and thank you, Galaxy. We'll be happy to do the answers.
Thank you, Leanne, and thank you, Dr. Smriti. That was very, very insightful to also understand what you are going through, because it's, it's about all of us. And thank you so much. There are a bunch of questions, so I'm going to start, maybe I will start with Leanne, which was the last question. would like to know some simple day-to-day things which you could suggest to reduce the anxiety and stress. I know you shared a few ideas, but maybe if you could summarize all of them, or add some more.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things I recommend, and this is something I do for myself and with my clients, is make at least 20 minutes about you, right? Take 20 minutes, whatever you're doing without guilt, take a break, whether it's to watch a sunrise or a sunset, because when you're in nature, it reminds you to slow down, and that's extremely helpful. So sunrise, sunset, go for a walk, but 20 minutes by yourself to just be. And ideally, if you can breathe, I know they say it a lot, but one of the simple ones is breathe in through your nose to the count of 5, hold your breath to the count of 5, and breathe out to the count of 8. If you do this before you sleep, any anxiety you have will come down because your body is automatically responding to that, right? In addition, there are other things that you can do in terms of affirmations. Actually tell yourself what you want to hear, because you want to hear something and the people around you may not be able to tell you that. You know what you want to hear, and in that minute, give it to yourself. Rather than waiting for someone to say the right thing, say what you need to hear. For example, I'm exhausted and I just need a hug. In that moment, you know what you need. Give yourself a hug. It may not be someone else, but at least you start empowering yourself, right? Draw it out. I think drawing is beautiful. And that's something people can do, where they just take that 5 minutes, 20 minutes to just do that. Connect with your body, dance, sing. Just find ways to express yourself. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. You can also check out my page for lots of coping strategies on Instagram.
Thank you so much. I think you've shared so many ideas, and I'm sure each of us will find different ways to deal with it. I think now we have Dr. Smriti here. Would request you to please turn on your video, Dr. Smriti. Okay. So going back to the beginning of the questions, is it inevitable that each of us will be infected sooner or later? But those who are vaccinated will have milder symptoms and faster recovery. This is a question.
Right.
For Dr.
So,
sorry.
yeah, Sonali, so, hello, am
Yes.
I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
So the question is that whether vaccinated will have a milder symptom, right?
And whether all of us are going to get it.
See, if we are not going to be cautious, if we are not going to follow COVID appropriate behavior, and if we are not going to get ourselves vaccinated whenever we are eligible for, I'm sure we are going to, because the recent data says that it is also spread by air. And one of the questions in your chat box also asked that now do we need to be more careful? Yes. But the things which we need to do are similar to what we have been telling since last year. So masking, double masking, sanitization, physical distancing continues. Important to remember is that vaccination is one protection which we have got better than last year. All those who are eligible should get themselves vaccinated. And when they say vaccination, follow the proper schedule of all the vaccination. Different vaccines have different schedules. You need to follow those schedules. Once you are completely vaccinated, most of the time, 2 weeks after the complete vaccination is when your protection begins. So I take my vaccine today, if it's a single dose, and I feel that tomorrow I am protected and I can indulge in any COVID inappropriate behavior, I'm wrong. I will catch it. As I said, don't oversmart the virus. It's pretty smart virus. So take precautions at least. And even once you are vaccinated, you still need to keep your guards up, because we are too early in this disease, to be sure about anything. So maybe we are saying that, vaccines are our, so game changers, or they're going to help us. You never know how different vaccines are going to behave, how the virus is going to behave. So things which we know of are good, but there are a pretty lot of things about COVID which we still don't know. So don't let your guard down.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think there's a question on how can one boost one's immunity? If you can share either, I mean, we are hearing lots of advice through yoga, breathing exercises, or food like turmeric, moringa, garlic, ginger. So, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts would be, see, there are lots, these are all natural remedies, and we in India, we have this culture of Ayurveda, which talks about food as one of the essential aspects of your health, and various spices which we talk about. I'm sure there's a lot of science into it, so I cannot debunk anything, but so to think that, if I keep my immunity up, I will not get COVID is what is wrong, is what I would say. That there's definitely it is worth keeping all these in mind. Don't overdo anything, as they will say that, we are listening here, seeing a lot of memes being talked about that, you are totally engrossed into kadas and, natural remedies throughout the day. Probably overdoing anything is not correct, but in moderation, all this has importance. They do have immunity boosting effect, and your immunity is your only sure protection against all infections, bacterial as well as viral. So it is important to keep that in mind. Don't overdo it, and don't be blind about the fact that, okay, if I've done this, I will not get it.
Thank you so much. I think, we've been getting so many different kinds of, advice on WhatsApp. So very helpful to hear your perspective on that. There is a question again for Dr. Smriti. We hear of many false negative COVID test results. The patient has all the COVID symptoms, has lost smell, but the RT-PCR is coming out negative. What should we do? Should we go for a retest?
Okay, so in such a scenario, we are seeing this quite often, and we have been seeing them since last year itself. So there's not a new phenomenon, I must say, because people started attributing this to, again, the variants and various type of variants where the RT-PCR comes negative, but the person is infected. This is a phenomenon. The test itself is not a 100% proof test. That is one thing. Second, the sensitivity and the specificity of the test also determines then it will come positive and then it will not come positive. So if, as a doctor, I feel that there's a high suspicion and this person will be COVID, we do retest. Okay, that is one thing. There are other tests also besides the RT-PCR, which give us a supportive evidence as to whether this ex-patient is COVID or not. That is second. Third is, the moment you feel that you have typical symptoms of COVID, as a patient, we advise isolation from the very time you feel like that. Once the reports come and your doctor will give you proper advice at the same, the further course of action would be taken care of. Again, I would suggest don't self-medicate even if you are RT-PCR positive or negative.
Thank you for clarifying that. In fact, there was a follow-up question on that if we have the symptoms but are getting a negative report, is it okay to start COVID medication or it's not advisable? In fact, I also saw in many WhatsApp groups a set of medication is being, advised.
Please don't self-medicate. There is a good consultation doctors are providing, and I'm sure there is even online consultations even doctors are providing. Please take expert opinion. Don't self-medicate. Don't go by these medicines which have been mentioned. See, every medicine comes with its own adverse effects. There are risk group involved, like you might be diabetic, heart patient, hypertensive, allergic to medicines. And if you just follow what is which has been circulated as a generic medicine, it might be harmful to you, and you might land up into trouble. So my sincere advice is, don't go by whatever these WhatsApp universities, or even if it is a genuine forward, I would still say that it is always advisable that as an individual patient, you consult a doctor. They will see you as an individual, assess you and advise you what is best for you. So I'm not even saying that all WhatsApp forward, the social media data is all wrong, or we are also here on a social media platform. So to say that everything is wrong would also be not correct. But when it comes to disease, when it comes to illness, it is not correct to, self-treat yourself. Even as a doctor, I tell them that if I am a patient, I prefer that I give myself to another physician who would probably more, logical in treating me. The moment I am infected, I become biased. So that's my suggestion.
Thank you so much for that input. This question is for Leanne. Are you seeing that with vaccination coming into the picture, people have become lax and careless? Are you seeing that in the clients that you work with?
Actually, quite a bit, yes, especially with the youngsters, because they're finding new ways to take the vaccine, even though they're not supposed to be taking the vaccine just yet. They're finding interesting ways to go out there, get people to give it to them without the certificate. And it's almost like a devil may care attitude, which is just like, anyway, whatever, let it go. But I think there's a deeper root for it, because with them, I think it's also a phase where the helplessness has led them to go towards apathy, which is I don't care if I die. Even the other day I'd spoken to a friend of mine and she's like, I'm done. And if I have to go out and die, it's going to happen, right? Like at some point I'm going to die. I might as well die now. And in instances like that where you need to hold space and say, I understand it's frustrating and you want to do it, but it's not just you looking after your being on the planet. It's also your family and what you mean to people around you, and to sort of instill a connection where they don't feel alone. Right now, a lot of people are feeling alone and it's almost like, let it go, let me go. So the lax attitude is there. But even with our clients, where we try and bring in a bit of practicality along with a mental health perspective to hold them together to say, it is a tough time for all of us and we're not just doing it for one, it's for all of us, right? It's like that thing that says, I wear my mask for you, you wear your mask for me.
Yeah. So true. Okay, there's a question. I think, Dr. Smriti, you sort of refer to it, but with the recent study that COVID spreads mainly through air, should the precautions be different from what we have been taking before?
Okay, so as I said, that the precautions don't change. What I can just state is that last year we were thinking that a lot of it is happening through fomites. So surface cleaning, cleaning the probably papers, and if you're bringing food from the market or vegetables, you're cleaning them. That has probably been on the down now, where we are seeing that that is not a major route of transmission. So you can go a little light on that. That don't be fanatic about the fact that I need to clean every other surface which I touch. Your own cleanliness is important, that you keep sanitizing yourself. But the new thing which is done is that it is airborne. When it says airborne, that means that the transmission through air is happening longer distances as well. So we do talk about 6 feet and 2 gaz ki duri between two people and physical distance, which is going to reduce the transmission. But it can happen beyond that as well. And that is why the masking and the double masking, which I say, bears the importance, so that your mask protects you from this long distance of airborne transmission as well.
Thank you.
So the methods don't change.
Sorry, Sonali. There's a follow-up question to that. You've been talking about double masking quite a bit. So Devika is asking, what does this double masking actually mean? Is it a double layer cloth mask, or should we be wearing 2 medical masks? What should we be wearing if she's going for a walk or if she's going to the market to buy something?
Fine. So I must say this concept of double masking, we are talking more in context of areas where we are seeing huge surge of numbers. For example, in India, for example, if you are staying in Brazil, for example, if you are somewhere in US, there are still crowds happening, there are still people venturing out, and the pandemic is in the peak of it. There we are saying just probably a simple cotton mask, a single mask would not be sufficing. So a double cotton mask would do better. Similarly, as you talk about, if you are using a simple cotton mask and over that a medical tri-ply mask which is available can be used. Again, don't fuss over the fact that I am not having, because otherwise people start hoarding then. If I'm not getting something, I'll try and hoard and keep it. You never know tomorrow your medical mask. These medical masks and N95 are meant more for healthcare professionals where the viral loads are high, okay, or if you are going and venturing into crowded place and there's no option for you, it's essential for you to go into that place. There. Otherwise, for a normal walk, simple cotton, 2 cotton masks would suffice, is what I say double masking. So any mask, 2 in nature. So double cotton mask or a tri-ply and a cotton mask or 2 tri-ply masks. Both should be fine.
And supposing a cotton mask has 3 layers stitched together, would that work?
Probably yes, but as I say, when I say 2 masks, I mean 2 masks. Okay,
2 masks.
It's not the layering, because even a triple layer mask has 3 layers to it. But we talk about double masking means that I'm providing a 6 layers to it. A tri-ply and then another tri-ply. So again, I'm saying this is with respect to places where the pandemic is at its peak.
Actually, this is a question. There are a lot of people who are experiencing challenges in getting a bed. So if they have been tested and they are really struggling to find a bed, so while they figure that out, what precautions or what steps do they need to take?
Okay, that's the reality of India at the moment. I must say, for the last 2 weeks or so, we have been overwhelmed by these type of calls where people are not getting hospital beds, people are not getting oxygen beds or even ventilators and ICU beds. That is the reality of India at the moment. I am in Mumbai, so I know for sure that it is happening in Mumbai, but I'm getting calls throughout India of people like this. It's a very, Leanne would know this much more, that this is a very sort of disheartening for the family members. It increases the stress more that you have a person in a family who needs hospital, and you are not able to provide this because of this. What I am sure the administration is looking very sincerely into this. Mumbai, I can for sure say that we have these jumbo facilities which were erected last year, and they were a big saviors in the way that how people in Mumbai say we have this societies, high rises, small homes. So isolation becomes difficult. So even if the person might not be requiring full-fledged medical attention in the form that they might not be requiring oxygen, but they do need isolation. So in those situations, it was becoming difficult, and then this jumbo facility idea came into the administration's mind, and they have been big saviors. Huge number of asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic patients are admitted there, so that they are isolated and they are under some sort of vigilance of a medical professional, even if it is less in number, but still through CCTV cameras, through a huge, videos and computers they have set up that you can overlook a large population. And then whoever needs can be shifted to a hospital or a tertiary care, which could provide in the form of oxygen. Now, this is something which saved us last year, keeping in mind the numbers. So I am hearing that, Mumbai is ramping up that. We had this big facility at Goregaon called NESCO, which had a 1,500 bedded facility and a 200 bedded ICU, which is going to be ramped up. Double it will be happening by next week. We are also listening that VKC, which was another jumbo facility, is ramping up another 2,000 beds. This is what I would tell you about the Mumbai, because I am more in connect with that. But I'm sure this is the only way by which this shortage of beds in the hospitals can be overcome. Because currently what's happening is that people who even don't need any oxygen are getting a hospital bed because they came first. Okay, that happened. Similarly, the high and the mighty and the privileged class try to keep, I will take this bed. Whether I need it or not is a second thing. So that's harming. That's just creating this type of shortage. There is real shortage is one thing, but there's also a created shortage which has to be looked into. What I suggest is, if you are in the category of mild or asymptomatic, okay, have a connect with a doctor. It could be a family physician. It could be a online consultation. There are people who are providing those. Keep in touch with them. So they will tell you what all you can do at your home itself. how you can isolate, even if you have a small house or where you have lots of people staying, they will still provide you some help. Don't be in a panic situation that I've come COVID positive and I need to immediately go and hospitalize myself, or I have to do something to get myself hospitalized. That's one thing. Second, we are talking a lot about oxygen concentrators. Okay, now these oxygen concentrators are instruments which usually concentrate oxygen from the atmosphere and give you oxygen at around 2 to 3 liters. It can go as high as 6 liters also, but they are a little expensive ones. There are companies and associations which have come up providing they're renting oxygen concentrators. So it's a good idea to keep the number handy. So in case you require, you know where to contact, and you can get an oxygen concentrator, which could be a stopgap till you get an oxygen bed in a hospital. Okay, that also gives you a little bit of mental relaxation that there's something, it would not be a doom if something goes wrong. That is one thing. Housing societies have thought of linking and setting up small makeshift, what I should say, not exactly ICUs, but sort of makeshift places where till the person gets a bed, they could be provided initial medication through doctor's consultation or even oxygen cylinders. But again, I'm telling you, it is always better to keep information handy rather than just going about straight and buying the oxygen concentrator, because again, the hoarding starts and then the people who really deserve don't get it. So keeping information handy be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Smriti. I can sense the emotion coming through when you're talking about this situation. It is very disheartening to see the kind of pressure the medical fraternity is under. There is a question from Rekha Vora. Is vaccination recommended for people above 65 with comorbids, please, especially diabetes, thyroid, blood pressure, and cholesterol?
Absolutely, absolutely. There is no doubt about it. That was the first group above 60 which started vaccinated, which were asked to get vaccinated. Don't be scared whether they are diabetic, hypertensive, heart disease. They are the ideal candidates to be getting vaccination. Consult your doctor. They'll tell you whether there is any medication. Most of them, they don't need to stop any medications also. You just inform them and go and take the vaccine. There's no, there shouldn't be any scare about it. There are lots of people who are in that category have already taken the vaccine. Go ahead and take it.
Yeah, thank you. Matangi is asking, is a prophylactic like ivermectin advisable, especially for older or vulnerable people with comorbidities underlying?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Again, something which is being propagated through social media and WhatsApp, I wouldn't advise. Don't do this. Don't self-medicate. There are lots of medicines which are going the round through social media. Please don't. Ask your physician.
Yeah, thank you.
So you're telling us not to self-medicate and to go to a doctor if we need it. I think that message has come across quite clearly.
Yes.
There's a question from Devika to Leanne. Can you give some advice on how to support others who may be grieving? There's only so much one can do through SMS and WhatsApp messages.
Right. So of course, I 100% agree. And what I'd normally recommend is if you can Zoom call people, right? Even if it is the elderly, if it's your grandparent, your parent, whomever it is, and forget the elderly as well, even your family, your friends, each one is grieving different things right now. If you take a moment and look at it, you may be grieving something very personal like traveling to meet your family, actually being able to go to work and meet a colleague. And in that moment, when you realize that you are feeling it, it's easier to develop empathy for the other, to say in that moment, the connection isn't about a message, but we want to see someone. We want someone's eyes, someone's face looking at us saying, hey, it's going to be okay, right? And sometimes that's what it is. It may not be okay, and to say it's okay if it's not okay. I'm with you. I'm here to support you. I am with you in this and in whatever way you need. One of the things I tell very often the parents of young ones who come to me, ask the child, ask your partner, ask whomever it is, how can I help you? Because when you say, how can I help you? You are allowing the person to A, give themselves some level of empowerment to say, hey, I need to also know what I want. B, you're helping them in the way that is specific to them. Very often you have partners who say, hey, I'll wash down the kitchen for you, or I'll do something. And it drives the other partner nuts because they're just like, why are you doing this? That's not something I want right now, right? So instead of doing something that's considered unhelpful, ask the person, because most often when you're asked, how can I help you? The person has an answer. And when you respond from that deep place of actual empathy, you connect. And honestly, initially, all of us were skeptical about Zoom calls to our friends because it just seems strange. But it's one of the most fun things, whether you're in your pajamas or your hair is a disaster or you have a face mask on, it doesn't matter, right? You just connect with another human being, and that's what it is at the end of the day. So one is be empathetic. One is talk about stuff that's not COVID related if they don't want it. Some people are so fed up of hearing it. Talk about TV shows, talk about the weather, talk about how pretty the sunset was. But of course, ask them if they need to talk about the heavies, hold space for the heavies, but also be able to talk about the light. Because if you look at it only from one perspective, it gets too much. And somewhere we need to also hold space that there are other things that may be working. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
I think that should. One last question for Leanne, because I think we're running tight on time. So just two last questions we'll take. One from Sonali Panda for Leanne. You mentioned how people are frustrated with COVID and have thrown caution to the winds. How do you deal with such people? Or rather, how should I deal with such a person, especially when they're saying that, oh, nothing can happen to me?
So one thing is, this is something I deeply believe will be helpful to everyone here, is understand that we all have personal responsibility. The more we try to control someone else and their actions, it is going to impact us because we start feeling a helplessness that may not be ours, right? So in that moment to say they are choosing to go out, they are choosing to throw caution to the wind. But if I don't want to catch up with them, I'm allowed to say, hey, I'm sorry you're meeting people, I can't. That's one thing I've done with my friends. If they do go out and meet other people, where I'm very clear and I say, I respect your decision. I'm sorry I can't be a part of it. And I also feel it, right? I want to be with you. However, I'll either join through Zoom or we'll catch up on call or video call, because I respect that's your decision. That also gives me a satisfaction that they are not feeling compromised. I'm not feeling compromised. I am safe. My family is safe. Right? So to some point, say I return accountability to them. They're adults. And if they're children, to say, we have to learn it, right? We can't force someone to learn it. At some point to say it is what it is, everyone's feelings are valid, because it is frustrating. And in all honesty, there are days when I want to throw caution to the wind and I literally have to rein myself back and say, no, hold on, you're more sensible than this. And it's hard. It's very, very hard. So to hold space for them, hold space for you and return responsibility. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Thank you, Leanne. There is one question which, after the first dose, there was fever, fatigue, and there was sternum pain. Is it normal? I think this person's requested, please put this question out.
Yes, yes, absolutely normal, not to worry. Okay. If that pain is continuing for a longer period of time, for example, if it's more than 48 hours and you have any other discomfort, please do consult your physician. Otherwise, a mild amount of ache, pain post-vaccination are normal.
Okay. Thank you. I think, I'm sorry, we will not be able to, take all the questions, but I request you to, come on to the Galaxy platform and ask your questions. Both Dr. Smriti and Leanne are part of the Galaxy platform and they will answer your questions. So please come on to the platform for any questions that we haven't been able to take up today. I know it's a Sunday evening and we want to wrap up in time. For people who probably, this is the first time you're listening about Galaxy, I'll just take one, couple of minutes to just explain what Galaxy is. So it's a platform for women, by women. And it's a safe space, like Leanne was saying, we need these safe spaces. It's a safe space for you to come and ask questions without any hesitation. And you will get answers from other women who've been through similar experiences. And we also have a panel of experts, two of them are in front of you right now, who will also go and answer your questions personally. The idea is to bring everyone together so that we can support each other. And we request you to, join us on the platform, because the more women we are able to reach out to, the bigger our impact will be. Our website is galaxy.co. You can see it on our backgrounds, and we also have our mobile apps. The QR codes are here. So that is my plug. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks to all our, participants, and big thanks to both our speakers. Dr. Smriti, we know you are dealing with a family, issue right now, and still you took out time to be with us. So thank you so much. It's very reassuring to hear from you, since you're dealing with it, day in and day out. And Leanne, thank you so much for all the, simple and easy to follow ideas that you've given. It's so important for us to remember and remind ourselves that, we are adults, and we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to pause and acknowledge what we are feeling, acknowledge, verbalize what we are feeling, and reach out and connect with other human beings. So on that note, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Kim, for holding fort and having all such a wonderful conversation. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening. Stay safe. Please don't self-medicate. And please reach out to
Thanks, Sonali.
others.
Thanks.
You.
Yeah,
Thank
Galaxy.
you.
This is fantastic.
Thanks, Karishma.
Thank you.